guys, welcome to another episode of the Brokers Open podcast. I am Dr. Ben Spears, the ambassador of Flow, here with the big guy as usual. Matt, how you doing?
Doing super excited. We got a great guest on. He's gonna talk about something that everybody should be paying close attention to going forward, right? And as not that they shouldn't have before, but absolutely now with all the shakeup of things that's coming, absolutely we need to pay close attention to it. So we're going to talk about Kevin in just a second, but that's the long story. You know me, it's always the long story.
Yeah, it's always the long story. I gotta cut you off every now and then. Let's introduce our guest here. So we have Kevin Bupp with Sunrise Capital Investments. Also has a podcast of his own, Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow. So you know he may just start taking over me. He's like, no, I don't have a podcast, dude. I'm just gonna I'm gonna take over the show, and I'm gonna sit back, cross my arms, and let it take over. So Kevin, how you doing?
Ben and Matt, I'm doing fantastic, and thanks for having me. And I promise I won't take things over.
No worries. Well, tell us a little bit about, Sunrise Capital, where you are, how you got there, why in the world, you're crazy like us and decided to start a podcast.
Right. So much to talk about.
Yeah, give us a little bit of the backstory on that. On how you started.
There's a lot there, so I'll try to dissect it piece by piece. Sunrise Capital Investors is essentially the my investment company. That particular company has only been around for about 6 years, but I've been a full-time real estate investor for now 20 years, and so basically my entire adult life. And I mean, like a lot of folks, I started investing in single-family properties way back when I was 19. I bought my first property when I was 19, and just kind of followed a mentor of mine that I had at the time. He bought a lot of smaller or single family and smaller multifamily properties where I grew up in Pennsylvania, and he kind of took me underneath his wing, and I just literally followed suit. I didn't try to reinvent the wheel. So that was my introduction. I literally ran with that and built quite a significant portfolio my early to mid 20s of single family and small multifamily properties. And then at some point along the way, probably about 5 or 6 years in, I saw that there was a little bit of a bigger game in commercial. And that's when I started kind of getting my feet wet, understanding some of the different asset classes. Self-storage was kind of the first one I looked at way back then, outside of multifamily. And then, from that point moving forward to where we are today, I mean, I've owned just about every type of commercial property. I've owned retail, I've owned self-storage, I've owned office, I've owned some industrial, but, today and literally for the past decade, my core focus has been mobile home parks. And so bought my first mobile home park back in 2012 and have bought many of them since then. We've got assets in 13 different states. And then we also buy parking assets. And so parking garages and parking lots in targeted areas, downtown business districts and tourism driven locations. So that's kind of a little bit of the background there. Again, 20 years, this is all I've ever done. I've owned other businesses, kind of like not side hustles, but I've had other businesses that I've had principal interest in, but real estate's always been the core of it. And then, the podcast, that's an interesting question. So I've been podcasting since 2014. Quite some time, and I had bought the equipment in 2013 and sat around for about a year until my wife told me she was going to put it on eBay if I didn't start that damn podcast I'd been talking about. But so I was an early adopter podcast. I started listening to them probably back in 2009, 2010. A lot of folks didn't even know what a podcast was. There were a few real estate related podcasts on the Apple platform, but the majority of what they discussed was single family investments, fixing, flipping single family homes or, buying and creating single family rentals. And that just really wasn't what I was interested in. So there wasn't material. I absorbed as much as I could, but there wasn't material that was of an interest to me. And so I was like, I might as well start my own, right? I'm sure there's other folks out there that want to learn about the different types of commercial real estate investing that exist. And so ultimately that's what I did. I set forth, and my show is, totally revolved around interviewing investors that specialize in different types of commercial real estate asset classes, from mobile home parks to retail to office to industrial to senior living. I mean, the list goes on and on. So there you go. I'm sure there's some voids and gaps there you'd like to ask a question about. That's kind of the general background of me and what it is I do.
No, that's it. I think we'll just call it a show. So Kevin, we've already talked about this. You're not a broker. You're not a licensed real estate agent. So tell us a little bit about, because I'm kind of segueing that into this area. Tell us a little bit about kind of, how you find your properties, or what the process looks like a little bit. Say, hey, I see this office building, or does this agent come to you and say, hey, I've got this office building, talk to us a little bit about that process.
Yeah, there's really two main ways that we find and have found all of our properties. One being, I'd say it's probably more predominant than that of even using agents, but one being just going direct to, going direct to an owner of a property that's not listed, a property that's actually not on the marketplace. And, we're very laser focused on what markets we want to invest in. We know every asset that fits our criteria within that marketplace. We have all that ownership information typically, who owns it, how long they've owned it, their phone numbers, their home mailing address, all that kind of stuff. And so a lot of times, if it's not a listed property, we'll literally just go direct to owner and have that conversation. But I'd say that amounts to about 60% of what we buy, maybe even 70% at some points. But the other remainder are from agents and brokers that have built those relationships with those owners of those properties. Either it's on the market, they take it out to the mass marketplace, or it's it's more of a pocket type of transaction. And so, we use both. I love working with brokers and agents that bring us opportunities, because it means that I didn't have to work too hard to actually find that opportunity, right? Like I'm kind of relying on their relationship, and them taking many, weeks, months, or even years to build a rapport with somebody that I didn't have to do. And so we use both methods, and both have been incredibly successful for us.
Yeah, awesome. So, Matt, you've been in real estate for like 70 plus,
something like that. Feels like that some days.
For 25 years plus. Right. And so, he's saying, it's nice kind of having, that person to rely. We just interviewed Omid Okale the other day, who really helps investors, and we'll get you guys connected, that
Absolutely.
kind of thing. That'd be a killer connection. Shout out to Omid. So talk to us a little bit about kind of bridge that gap. I'm a real estate agent, listening to this podcast. Here's this guy. He's, absolutely, crushing it, with investment properties. How can I help a person like that? And also, grow my business at the same time.
So I gotta throw this out there, Kevin, right? So many times agents think that there's a love-hate relationship with investors, right? I mean, we gotta put that's the 800-pound gorilla in the room. And part of the reason why is because often agents don't understand the investing space. And because they don't understand the investing space, they kind of trip over things with the investor. That's part of it. And then just like with, with agents, there's great agents, and with investors, there's great investors, and with agents, there's terrible agents, and with investors, there's terrible investors, right? So all of that kind of gets mashed up, which, I mean, I would think the smartest thing for anyone that is in real estate, and I'll define in real estate in just a second, anyone that is in real estate should take a close look at any investor that they're trying to work with, and any investor should take a close look at any real estate agent that they're trying to work with, and see if they fit what you're trying to accomplish. So that's kind of like a question for you, and I'd like for you to dig into that in just a second. But let me say one more thing about that in real estate. So a lot of agents, most agents, a very small percentage of it, cannot obtain real wealth by just selling real estate. They actually have to invest. They need to get into real estate. So instead of just being in real estate, they actually need to be in real estate. And they think that because they're helping people buy and sell houses every day, that makes them great investors automatically. And that's just not the truth, right? I mean, you and I both know that. So there's two things to kind of unpack there, and I'd love to talk about how we marry the two of those things together, so that the audience gets some mindset and some best practices that could help them out, and investors like you that are doing things the right way to be able to do a lot of business.
Yeah, I'll try to unpack that. You might have to help guide me back through it once we start talking here. But so I'll hit on the first point, which is agents that are considering working with investors, and maybe the mindset they need to have when it comes to working with investors. And I'd say this, if you're an agent, you make money by having completed transactions, right? Selling a property, or being part of the transaction of a sale or a buy of a property. And the more transactions you make, the more money you make. And so I think one of the understandings that agents must have when it comes to either working with an actual home buyer that's looking to be an owner occupant that just, is buying it for their own personal use, or an investor, is that with an investor, more than likely, if they're an active investor, they're worth more than just one transaction every,
Right.
what's the average length of time that a homeowner stays in their home? I don't know the answer. Is it 5 years? Is it 7 years? Something like that, right? Like if it's an active investor, more than likely, you're probably going to get a multiple, if not many, transactions out of that one investor, whereas you might only get one transaction out of that person that's buying their home,
Right.
every 5 to 7 years. So I think that's something very important to understand, is that like you want to work, you want to work smart with your time, and finding the right investors,
Yeah.
and jumping on that bus is going to probably get you a much larger transaction, not transaction monetarily, but actually volume wise.
Yeah.
And so I think that's just important to understand. And so then the other part of that, would be, investors aren't, they're not emotional when it comes to buying property. I mean, we look at the simple, hard facts when we're evaluating a property. We're looking for particular returns. We're looking for, knowing that it's in the right neighborhood, it's going to hit our return metrics, and that's about it. That's really it. And so, you're not running through the emotional roller coasters that exist when working with folks that are looking for their, their dream home, right? Their forever home. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, it's a very different clientele. And so, again, my personal preference would be to deal with the folks that have less emotions. Whereas if, there's certain agents out there that maybe that is like, that is their passions, to help someone find that forever home. They want to deal with those emotions. They want to help, coach them through that emotional process. Right now. So I think you have to kind of figure out what kind of agent you
Matt
are.
just loves emotion.
Yeah, you have to figure out what kind of agent you are, because working with a cold-hearted investor might not be good suited for your personality type, and vice versa. So, and then I'd say once you identify what type of agent you are, and really where you want to focus, and assuming that you come to the realization that you'd also like to invest in real estate, right? Like your long-term goal is to invest in real estate. I'd say there's been many agents or brokers that I've transacted with over the years that have brought us property, maybe more than one property, and ultimately they have gotten involved in that property. Literally, they've literally either exchanged a portion or all their commission and put it into equity into that particular property. And so they're becoming a real investor, and they're actually learning along the way. I see the value that they bring to the table. They see the value that we bring to the table. And so they're kind of marrying the two together and getting an education as they make money as a broker or as an agent. So, again, there's a lot of benefits of working with investors. Again, if you want to go down that road at some point in time, it's best to get aligned with folks that are doing what you want to do and being successful at what that you ultimately want to do as far as investing. And so, I think that's a beautiful partnership and relationship that can be established once you start working with, some very strategic and successful investors.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one thing that I saw a decent amount with agents that would be helpful, and if this is off base, I mean, just say, hey, from my perspective, Matt, you're crazy as hell, right? I'm good with that. So a lot of times agents would get connected with an investor, they would start working with them, they'd work through a transaction, and then they almost felt like that all the business that investor did needed to be their business somehow, right? And so they added a lot of value in a certain transaction, and then thought that they were connected, or that they and that investor were connected in a way that honestly they just might not have been connected. The agent being able to deliver value even on transactions that they're not participating in, because you just said, between 60 and 70% of your transactions, you don't need the agent in the middle of that. You're getting it worked out with the seller. I think agents have to be able to step back and stay connected with the investor and say, okay, the ones that you need my help with, I'm here, and here's what I've come across that I hope is helpful. But I don't need to be there in everything, but I'm not going to divorce myself if you go do a transaction with another agent, or you go do a transaction that's your next 3 transactions as an investor or directly with the seller. The agent needs to not get emotional about that, and understand that the investor, a savvy investor, doesn't need them with every transaction. They're just going to need them certain times, certain places. Is that right? Am I missing something?
And I think it also, we have to understand what type of real estate we're talking about, because in a typical single family transaction, most properties in the single family residential world, they end up they get brought to market, like they literally get put on the MLS. And so if we're talking about that type of transaction, then I'd say that it's more common that there's always going to be an agent involved, and either it can be a buyer's rep or seller's rep, what have you. And so I would say that if I had an agent that ultimately you continually got me deals off the MLS, and they're always feeding them to me, then there would definitely be some loyalty there. Not that we're going to do every transaction with them, because if another agent over here brings it to my attention before my agent does, then ultimately, I'm not going to throw someone in the middle of that mix just to throw them in the middle of that mix where it ultimately might blow up the deal. And so, but in the commercial world's a little bit different. And it's, if an agent brings me an opportunity, then I'm absolutely working with that agent. If another agent brings me an opportunity, then this other agent that I did the first one with has no, I mean, they more than likely can't bring any additional value to the equation. It just, there's no additional benefit there that they're going to bring to the equation by me bringing them into it. And so I don't think those same emotions exist in the commercial world as they might in the residential space. And so, so I'm not sure if I didn't really answer the question, but I think it's important for both sides to have loyalty, but understand that it's not going to always be an exclusive type relationship.
Yeah.
And I think that if there's that understanding set forth right from the get-go, I think that's the important thing, right? Setting expectations, and actually speaking through those expectations. I mean, just having an adult conversation right out of the gate, so that everyone's on the same page. I think that would literally solve the majority of any of these types of issues that we're discussing. They would never even come up. They wouldn't be an issue. So,
yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And so, excuse me. So, Kevin, I'm curious, and you don't have to divulge these numbers, but as I was a real estate agent at one point. Worked with some investors. Matt, 25 years, as a broker. There's one thing that, if I'm an agent and I say, well, I'm looking to maybe, work with some investors, and then they do find themselves, kind of chasing that loyalty that you're looking for, because again, as residential, it's, I sold you your first home, and your kids' homes, and you're this, that, and the other. But when you're working with an investor, just like you said, that loyalty, that exclusivity is the best word to say. Isn't always there. But as an agent, you feel like, well, gosh, there aren't that many deals that are going to happen.
Right.
I really want to, Kevin is so successful. I want to latch on to Kevin and just make sure that I can, be as successful as he's growing. And the question I have for you is how, and you don't have to answer, how many transactions do you do in a year? Because I want to give agents, an idea of knowing, well, gosh, you're probably not going to just be able to survive working with one single investor forever, unless they're just doing, a certain amount of transactions. If you want to get in investing, there initially needs to be, you're almost your own portfolio of investors that
Sure.
you're working with.
Yeah, I mean, as far as our average deal size is about 12 to $15 million, and so we're doing roughly 5 to 6 transactions a year. So it's a little different, than that of a single family investor that's maybe buying 20, 30, 40 rental properties in a given year or something along those lines. But yeah, to answer your question, that's typically what our transactional volume looks like. And then this year we've purchased 5 properties, but the average is up a little bit. One of them will end up being like a $30 million, property, a little bit bigger than our average in size. And so, but again, the commercial world, it's a little unique in that, commercial brokers are a very different breed than that of residential
Very
broker,
much.
because they're a lot of the guys that I know, the Marks and Milchap, CBRE, all the brokers that are specialists in the different spaces that we operate in, a lot of them won't even offer a co-broker. They literally won't. They don't want you bringing another agent to the equation. They've got their own marketing list. They've got their own contacts, and I've actually seen very similar things in the residential space. I know that's not supposed to be that way. But I'll tell you, I'll give you an example. And this is important for agents to understand so they don't get their feelings hurt. Last year I bought a property. This was more of a personal investment. It's a mobile home park, but it's a big piece of residential land and then a mobile home park, yada, yada, yada. It was a residential agent that had it listed. And you know, I initially I've got a close friend of mine that's I tried to reach out to this agent many occasions about the listing, just was, you know, didn't return calls, just was
Yeah.
just, you know, very evasive. And so a good friend of mine's a licensed agent. And so I just basically said, hey, why don't you see if maybe you can break through and get some feedback from this guy. And ultimately, you know, over the phone, not recorded, not in an email or anything like that, basically said like, I'm not going to pay, I'm not willing to pay any commissions. You know, I'm not, you know, you can bring me a buyer, but I'm not going to pay anything. And so this guy I was like, I'm gonna have to deal with him directly. And so I finally showed up at his office one day and got him to talk with me. We ended up buying the property, but if I would have tried to use another agent, I probably, and it was a very desirable property. I'm not sure exactly what his challenge was, why he wasn't returning calls and things of that nature,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
we probably wouldn't have been the end buyer on that property if I would have continually just told my agent friend
Right.
to like keep badgering him and keep, you know, trying to, you know, work the deal at him. Again, I know by law, the agent's supposed to, you know,
Oh, yeah.
basically
Cooperate.
show every offer and cooperate, you know, show every offer to the, you know, prospective seller. We just know that it doesn't happen all the time, unfortunately. And so in that
Agreed.
scenario, I would have lost that deal. I wouldn't have been able to buy that deal. And I'm glad that we did buy it. It's worked out really well for us if I wouldn't have gone directly with the listing broker. So again, I know it's not supposed to operate that way, but it's life. And there's, you know, lots of brokers don't really follow, you know, a particular code of ethics. And you just kind of have to adapt and, you know, duck and weave as necessary.
I thought all you had to do was put out signs that say we buy ugly
Yeah.
office buildings. Isn't that as easy as it is? I
Yeah,
thought,
we do that too for mobile home park. We do a lot of direct mail. We do a lot of cold calling. So like that's our direct to own. I mean, we basically, you know, so I think this is an important lesson for agents that want to work with investors. So you know what we do very similar things to what really really good agents do. You know,
Right.
the agents that have, you know, the ones that are just like the power listing agents. You know, the ones that are getting a majority of the listings. Kind of the old 80-20 rule. And so
Right.
you know what we do is what a lot of them power agents do, you know, to get their listings. We find our opportunities that way as well. We literally pound the phones. We build relationships with the owners of properties. We understand, you know, we document it in CRM.
good.
We follow up with them on a regular basis. We send them letters. I mean, we visit them if they're local to us. We'll, you know, stop by their office or their property and chat with them. And so we do the same thing any really good agent can do. And so if you want to work with investors, you want to bring them as much value as possible.
Yep.
Think of that. You know, figure out what they want to buy, what areas they want to buy it in, if that's your marketplace or the couple marketplaces that you kind of specialize in, and then learn everything there is to know about every one of those properties and every one of the owners, when the owners intend to sell, like what kind of their long-term, you know, or long short-term financial plan is with that property, and sandwich yourself in the middle, right? So that you're the one building that relationship, so that when the time comes for them to make a decision to sell, you can then take it to your investor base, and that's how you add value to them. Like that's truly how you sandwich your way into the equation and bring a ton of value to investors. And that's also how you'll create a ton of loyalty with these investors. So
I love it. So that's such good advice. That actually will help us transition just a little bit, because I wanted to. I love the conversation. We could talk for an hour about that easily.
all day long.
But I want to kind of transition the conversation just a little bit, right? Because I want some best practices for agents that are contemplating getting into the business themselves, right? And whenever I say the business, I mean the business of buying and selling properties themselves, right? So you just talked about, you know, knowing the properties really well. When you start to analyze a property, when you start to take a close look at property, of course, you know, price and square footage and income and all that kind of stuff kind of factor into it. But if there's an agent out there that's going, okay, I really need to lean into how I invest, what are some of the things that you found through your experience that weren't just the common things that everybody has easy access to, that you know, everybody's kind of got you know, the data from wherever they're getting it these days? What are some things that you found that people really need to pay attention to on the investing side, so that they're less likely to trip up on things? What is it that they should look at that would make a big difference, that maybe you've seen other people trip up on, or through your experience you tripped up on?
yeah, no, that's a tough question to answer. You know, I'd say I really understand your numbers. I mean, I know it sounds so simple, but everyone goes into a particular investment, at least they should, with some type of expectations of what that property should do. If you're just a speculative buyer and you think you're going to buy for 100 and flip it for 200 and you have no data or, no statistics to support that, then you need to go back to investing school completely. But if most folks that get into an investment, they're seeking a projected return, whether it's like long-term cash flow, they want a certain, cash on cash return, or they're looking to get in and, fix and flip it. And they want a certain, IRR, in a, certain period of time. Understand what your expectations are, and be honest with yourself about the reality of actually that property getting there. And so don't just rely. I've seen a lot of buyers nowadays. It's so crazy. I see so many buyers, and actually a property that we've sold recently, mobile home park, great park. We owned it for a couple of years. We did really well with it. And we listed it with a broker, and they put it out to the marketplace. And I know this property better than they do. We've run it for 4 years. I know all the ins and outs of it. I know the good, the bad, the ugly, right? And I looked at their pro forma of what they basically are pitching it to the marketplace of what it can do. And I'm not saying that it's wrong. I'm just saying that I think they were being a little overzealous with what what it could really do over the next 12 to 24 months. And the buyer bought it based on the broker's underwriting, not necessarily digging into their own and setting their own expectations. So they completely bought it on the broker's underwriting. And I hope it hits it. I hope they reach that goal. I just don't think they will. I don't think it's realistic. And so I'd say if that broker would have been more, or if the buyer would have been more involved and actually would have gotten into the nitty gritty, the brokers never went and visited the property. They kind of, they put together their own pro forma based on their own assumptions, didn't really, ask us too many detailed questions about, our own assumptions or why we didn't hit certain metrics over the 4 years that we owned it, what have you. I mean, just kind of, again, it was all marketing to them, and hey, so be it. They got their sale, they got their commission. They're not on the hook. They're not, they don't have equity in the deal. And the buyer, I would say that he didn't dig in deep enough and understand exactly how he's going to, is it realistic that he's going to be able to hit his return targets, based on his own reality, not the broker's reality. So I think that is a huge mistake. I mean, I see it happen all the time with novice buyers. So how you alleviate that, if you don't know, mobile home parks have their own unique intricacies. And if you don't understand the business in its entirety, then you maybe you partner with somebody on the first deal or the second deal, someone that's actually experienced, right? Maybe you've got the capital, and maybe that's your value add to the equation. You can bring equity to the equation, but you want to basically work side by side with a sponsor group or a team that's actually been there and done that. So like we've had many folks over the years that have brought us deals, and they've put in some equity. We put in the majority of the equity, and they kind of ride our coattails. They want to see how this goes, how this really works out, not what the broker was pitching in their offering memorandum, but like how this really plays out, in the real world, and the challenges that you might face that you didn't anticipate facing and things of that nature. So, and speaking to like residential investments, every market out there, and, all your listeners, no matter where they're located in this country, they're probably within 10 minutes and maybe at the most an hour of a weekly real estate investment club that gets together, and meets up. So, that's how you meet other folks that are doing what you want to do. There's many different avenues out there to find those folks that share an alignment of interest, and get together with them, get to know them, find out who's the doers and who's just the sayers, right? Like you want to very quickly separate yourself from just the ones that go to the meetings every week and actually don't ever take action. Find like that small 5 or 10% that are actually doing deals, and get to know them really well.
I've got to give you some kudos. You said all of that so nicely about that agent not knowing what the hell they were doing and basically screwing over the buyer.
And I'm not saying that I don't think they intentionally did it, but like,
I don't think so either. Yeah,
I know these agents really well, and they're really, really good agents. They're good guys. They actually are. And they know their business theoretically. I'll put it that way. They know their business theoretically. Not one of the 4 in the group has ever owned a mobile home park. They've transacted a ton of them. And so it's like reading a book of how to build a business versus actually diving in and taking the risk to build the business and then dealing with all the challenges that come along the way. It's very different than just, reading in textbook format. And so anyway, again, I hope,
You
I
said
hope
it.
and pray that the buyer does quite well. I hope he knocks out of the park and and hits a home run. Maybe does, right? And I'm not going to say we're the best operator. I'm not going to say that we're not. What we gave to him, it does still doesn't have value add component. They can't
Agreed.
have upside on it, but I think it was just a little overzealous. That's all.
Yeah. So there's my question was, what should people do to make sure they position themselves the right way? And I think you gave a great example and said it really nicely, that you have to be prepared, but you also have to
Yeah.
be responsible for your decision.
You can
can't
either make the
just-
mistakes. You can either make the mistakes yourself and learn from mistakes, or you can,
That's right.
partner up with somebody that's already
I love
made a
that.
lot of those mistakes. It doesn't mean you won't make more, but like you partner with someone that's already been there and done that, that's maybe had some of those school of hard knocks moments, and can hopefully
Absolutely.
help you bypass those and save you some money and headache.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of things on this on this podcast that I really love, and especially things that the agents need to hear, and I'm going to recap those just a little bit, and then for sure I'm going to bring it right back to Kevin and ask him how do people get in touch with him and that kind of thing. But
Absolutely.
we heard those items. We also one of my favorite things that he said was if whenever we're searching for our own properties, we're doing whatever the best or the great real estate agents do, right? We're prospecting, we're leading with value. We are we're finding everything that we can as far as information goes about our market or about the property that we're looking at.
Yep.
Right. So essentially, doing the things that every single great agent does.
Absolutely.
If you're out there and you're struggling, here's someone who's absolutely crushing it. Right. Matt and I talk about it a lot on the podcast, and the words were used. We're doing what every great agent does.
Yep.
If you're not doing those things and you're not a great
agent, right.
agent, really look in the mirror and take a look at yourself and see if maybe you can measure up.
I think it's about not reinventing the wheel, right? I mean, if you work for
Exactly.
the local Remax office, like, who's the main guy there? Like, who's the guy that does 90% of the sales? I mean, who is that? And what are they doing? Literally just
Right.
dissect what they're doing. Whatever they're doing is working, and you probably don't have to reinvent the wheel at all. You probably just literally model exactly what that individual is doing, and you'll probably find very similar, if not even better, success. It's pretty straightforward. You're going to bust your ass is what you're going to do. You're going to have to work really hard. So long as you're okay with working really hard, because that's what it's going to take, whether you're a really rock star agent or you're a rock star investor, you're going to have to work really hard. It's going to be stressful. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to lose some hair, get some gray hairs, whatever. Like, there's going to be sleepless nights, but I mean, that's ultimately what all these high earners and high performers do. I mean, it's not easy for them. It doesn't come by luck. They work really hard to get there.
And I think a key thing to point out, and I know the three of us know it, and I know some of the listeners know it, but a key thing to point out that's almost like an undertone of this that can't be overstated. When you're wanting to do business with someone, it can't just be that you connect with them when you need something. I'm assuming that a lot of the people that you're connected with, that you're doing transactions with and everything, you don't just pick up the phone the day that you need them and say, hey, I need something from you right now, right? You're connected with them in other times. Things come up and you're sharing information with them. You're saying, hey, I heard this great podcast, or I've got something that is going to be valuable because I know we've had real conversations, and in those real conversations, you said you were interested in this, so I wanted to share that with you. You were saying just a second ago, who's doing all those transactions at that Remax office? What are they doing? They're connected not just during the transaction. They're connected before it, they're connected during, and they're connected after, and they're doing a great job communicating with people. Mm-hmm. And that's absolutely what you said that you were doing. You stay in front of people, and so that way when the time comes up, it's not just picking up the phone and hoping you hit that person that wants to sell. Because I'm assuming the transaction cycle of this isn't like a 30-day transaction cycle. So
no, we've had deals that have taken years from the first point of contact. I always say that there's always a a reason that someone either needs or wants to sell. A need would be like health issues, partnership challenges, divorce, something like that. And then a one is like we've reached our investment cycle with this particular deal, whatever we had outlined. And so we're wanting to take the equity we have in this and redeploy it into another investment, whatever. But like the whole goal and the objective here is to be in front of them when that day comes, when they finally make that decision
That's right.
to either, need or want to sell, you want to be the one that they think of. And the only way that's going to happen is if you might get the timing right on a few of them, where you just happen to pick up the phone
Right.
the one time, the
Yeah.
first time you call them, and they're like, well, you know what? I was just thinking. I mean, we actually just bought a property this year. It hasn't happened like that in quite a number of years, but we literally caught the guy. He's like, I was just having lunch. He picked up his cell phone. I called him, cold prospecting. He's like, I was just having lunch today with one of my partners. And we were just talking about getting this thing on the market in like the next month, and kind of caught me at a very opportune time. So we ended up buying the
Nice.
property. That doesn't happen that often. Very
Yeah.
rarely, if ever.
Yeah, you can't plan a career on that.
No, not at all.
So I've got one more question, and I'll let Ben summarize and everything. But I've got one more thing that I just gotta that I gotta know with all of this. What is it that, so you've done well with this. You've been really successful with it. You sound like the kind of guy that's just constantly learning and constantly trying to make better, the things that you do and everything. What do you think is the biggest benefit over the 20 years of investing? What do you think, other than the money, right? Because the money allows us to do some of the things that we want to do. What do you think is the biggest benefit that you've gotten out of actually investing and doing what you've done, other than just the financial wealth building, income? What is it that's benefited you the most, or your family the most, or whatever?
Yeah, and I guess it's tied to, wealth or just success would be just, lifestyle, and not even lifestyle, but just flexibility. I mean, I really enjoy, I love spending as much time with my boys and my wife as possible. And we take a lot of trips together, and, just literally having more so the flexibility to kind of, I don't know, just make not necessarily make my own schedule, because there's responsibilities. I mean, I work normal days, but I've got flexibility to take off and go most of the time when I want to or need to. And so that's it. Like that for me, like that was always the most important thing. Especially when I was younger, before I was married, before I had a family. I knew that when that time came in my life, I wanted to be at a point to where, I wasn't locked into working, 80 hours a week, and just kind of slaving away, not happy with what I was doing, and, only getting, 2 or 3 weeks vacation a year. I just, that never really interested me. In fact, some of the biggest lessons I learned from a few mentors I had earlier on, there's two very specific mentors that played a major role, one in the earlier years, and then one kind of in the middle years, of my, of my growth being a real estate investor. And both those mentors were about 20 to 25 years older than I. So they already kind of at a different stage of their life. They had already had kids. Their kids were, at the point when I met them, their kids were, teenagers. And both those mentors both had literally the same regrets. And the biggest one was that they they spent way too much time in the earlier years of their kids' lives missing baseball games, soccer games, swim practice, all that kind of stuff. Both of them had gone through divorces because of neglect to their significant other, and they couldn't get that time back. They number one, they lost like a phenomenal partner in their life. Their wife, like both of their wives, they like it like impacted them, greatly. I mean, they were happy. They thought they were happy with their marriage, but their obviously their significant other was not. And then their children, they can't get those years back. They can't recreate memories that they ultimately never, that never took place. And so I just knew I never want to go down that road. And so real estate has given me the ability to, just have that flexibility and create the lifestyle that I can spend as much time as I want with my family and create those memories. So that by far is hands down the biggest benefit that I've gained of being a real estate investor.
So good.
Yeah, I absolutely love that as well. Guys, I'm going to summarize, the way that I summarize. Matt will probably take over and like summarize the way he likes to summarize.
Me?
I summarize in a way of like, guys, like, if you have a choice of being Kevin Bupp or not being Kevin Bupp, just be Kevin Bupp.
Right.
And what I mean by that is, gosh, put in the work, put in the effort, and do the right things, and make sure that you're smart about everything that you're doing. And lastly, and I think this is probably the most important, thing that we talked about, and the word came up a lot, is have reasonable expectations. It doesn't mean don't have, outlandish goals. Like whatever you want your goals to be, like rock and roll, you go out there and get them and make them happen. But make sure that the steps that you're taking along the way, you're setting and having reasonable expectations for yourself, your investments, your success, the types of way that you market, the types of way that you prospect, and invest, your own money in the growth of your real estate business.
Absolutely.
So, Kevin, how do people get in touch with you? How does everyone, finish listening to our podcast and go straight to your podcast and start listening to yours as well? And everything that you say, as far as, links and that kind of stuff, will be in
Sure.
the description below.
Okay, good deal. Yeah, no, so kevinbupp.com, you can go there and learn about, a little bit more about me and our company. And then also that's where I host one of my 2 podcasts, Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow. And then our company is sunrisecapitalinvestors.com. So if you want to learn about what we do in the mobile home park or the parking space, from an investment side of things, you can learn a lot there as far as who we are and what we look for. And again, there's even opportunity for those that are listening. I mean, if you're looking for a particular niche and you want to bring value, we're always looking to work with folks that, find us leads that fit our criteria. And so we pay big finder's fees, or even we'll, JV with you on a deal if you're looking for that. So anyway, so kevinbupp.com and sunrisecapitalinvestors.com are the 2 ways.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. Well, Matt, you and I are just 2 of the luckiest guys in the world, because we get to sit down with the brightest minds in real estate.
Right.
And our listeners are second luckiest, because they get to listen to us talk to these amazing
It's a
people,
beautiful thing.
and pick their brains. But as always, at Brokers Open Podcast, it is not just about open houses.
It's about open minds.
See you guys.
Thanks, guys.